So next up is a panel that I get to host for you guys. And we're going to talk about websites. Pretty much everything we've talked about today, yesterday, all sort of ends at your website, whether it's your social presence, whether influencer marketing, whatever kind of communications you're putting out there, almost all of them end up on your own hub, your central point to communicate with your audience, and that's your website. So we've put together a pretty fantastic panel today. Gentlemen, if you want to join me, come on out. All right, so come have a seat. So to help us dig into this topic, I'm joined by Eric Williamson, who is the VP of Digital Marketing at Acquia, Ezra Silverton, President of Operations at Ninth Co., and Shayan Rostam, Chief Registry Officer at Intercap. Gentlemen, welcome. To kick off, why don't you give us a little bit of a sense of your role and your connection to websites? Tell us what you do.
Sure. Well, that's good.
Good start.
Yeah. So I'm Eric Williamson. Work for a company called Acquia. So Acquia is an open source technology company built around Drupal. In a nutshell, it's the platform, the hosting, and the scalability for sites for companies like NASDAQ, for Tesla, for NBC. Basically, the platform worries about scalability, reliability, so they can focus on their story.
Right. Great.
And I'm in the marketing department, so I oversee brand and our digital marketing.
Oh, fab.
I'm the Chief Registry Officer of the .inc domain ending, so we actually operate the domain ending .inc. So rather than .com or .net, we are launching .inc in January, and it's essentially a new platform for businesses to use either as their investor relations sites, their corporate sites, their newsrooms, and we're the wholesaler. So we operate the namespace, and then we rely on our partners like GoDaddy or Network Solutions to actually retail the domain names. So that's coming in January, and we're going to make it available to the general public in February.
Great. That's right.
And my name is Ezra Silverton. I'm President of Operations and Website Design for Ninth Co. And Ninth Co is a conversion optimization company based out of Toronto, Canada.
Fantastic, my hometown. So there's so many places we could start, so many places to dive in. But I thought it would be really interesting. You know, a lot of the times we're when we're speaking with clients or prospects, price seems to be the primary concern. But I'm wondering, from your perspective, like when companies are thinking about their website, what should they think about first? First and foremost, is it content? Is it design? Is it price? It's not price, is it?
None of the above.
Right.
I mean, fundamentally, you want to obviously figure out what your goal is, right? What are you trying to achieve? But beside that, at least for me, I've always advocated for what's the best possible user experience. What do I need to put on this website to actually create that best experience?
Yeah.
You have to set it from that perspective first.
Yeah.
Agree. Obviously, you have to worry about price. Worked on the agency side, now on the client side. Budget's always, at the top of your head. But I think the first thing I would be thinking about is data. So you've got some historical data you can be looking at. So look there, and then I agree with Ezra in terms of the user experience. Even if you've got a small budget, you can talk to your customers or whoever your users are, and do some sort of scrappy UX workshop before you even start worrying about design.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's about the accessibility of what you're trying to have your customers look at. So is it, are you making whatever you want them to look at first readily available on your website? Are you able to direct people to it effectively from social media or from other platforms? And are you giving them a clear direction once they're on your website of what you want them to look at? How do you control that message to them so that it's not coming from somewhere else?
Right. So it's much more about the UX, the design, the feel, and making sure they're looking at the things you want them to see, right?
Exactly.
And so our topic today was, is your website telling the right story? But I'm curious to hear from you guys, like, how would you tell that? Is it data? Like, if I think that maybe my website isn't having the impact that it should, where do I start? How do I uncover what's wrong?
In addition to the UX, I think he started talking about this, but if your company doesn't have some sort of corporate messaging guide, I think that's also a key part of being able to tell your story. So starting at the brand level, what's your pitch? What's the basic North Star statement that sums up what your company's about, and then break it down from there, almost the inverted pyramid we were talking about yesterday.
Right.
What's the basic story for each one of your products or services? If you've got that framework, then how you tell your story becomes a lot easier and more consistent. If you don't have that framework, it's going to get a little sloppy. Your site could look beautiful, but not tell any story, just be vague.
Yeah, be stunning looking, but what do you think?
Well, I think it always helps to look at what are the leaders doing. I've looked at a lot of investor sites. I think, for example, Apple does a really good job with theirs. They have made it easy for journalists to get content. They've made it easy for investors to find what they're looking for, and it's just very well directed overall. And if you want to subscribe for alerts, you can do that. So there's been a lot of thought put into how that's run, and I think if you look for like who are some of the leaders in your space, or even just overall, that's a great way of just kind of getting some inspiration.
Right. What do you think, Ezra?
Yeah, I mean, website analytics will help a lot with that information.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I mean, polling surveys are a great option. It's something really simple on the site, excuse me. And even just social listening to see, how your message is reflecting to the general audience.
By polling surveys, do you mean those little pop-ups that say, like, would you like to spend 30 seconds after you're done on the site? Give me your
I just
feedback?
wouldn't do the pop-up scenario, but
Right.
something similar, yes.
Especially not after our GDPR guys told
Right.
us all about why we shouldn't do that, right? So let's say that I take your advice and I've uncovered some issues. Where do I start if I'm going to improve my website? And is that approach different if I'm just improving, let's say, the IR section, the newsroom, or the whole corporate site? Or should I always be thinking about it together? How do I improve it?
I think a website project's never really done. You can have full redesigns, but even once you've launched it, you're constantly working on it, and you should constantly be running some sort of test to find out what you should be improving, whether it's just a basic A/B test and you're siphoning off some percentage of your traffic to test something, or you're looking at, like he said, I agree, Apple's probably one of the most impressive one that I've seen. Starbucks is another good one. Steal from those ideas and test them out on your own audience.
Right. What do you think, Shayan?
Yeah, I think it's about creating a cohesive online presence overall. So if you're changing up one aspect of your website, everything else that's tied back to it should all feel the same. And so I think that's the main thing to think about. And also just doing testing, as you said, and tracking all the data, tracking where's the time being spent on the website, what are the behaviors, and then even can you remarket to these people later? And that's an additional way of kind of controlling your message.
Mm-hmm. Do you agree, Ezra?
Yeah, I mean, don't wait to do major alterations in big chunks. It's gradual and continual improvement all the time.
Right.
I mean, being able to test an element and seeing what kind of effect that's having on the site, it provides you much greater feedback and than making a big update in big chunks.
And two follow-up questions for you guys. Do you find clients are willing to do this kind of testing? Like, is it a hard sell to get them to actually deploy some of this kind of A/B testing?
Well, A/B testing I was talking about was really more of something that happens on the site without the user even knowing.
Right.
It's something they may not know that they've been part of the 10% of the traffic that was shown this B version, for instance.
Right.
But one thing that we do is we have a customer advisory board, and it is hard to get them to do things throughout the year, but at our customer appreciation conference, we have our CAB sessions, and sometimes what we do is the scrappy UX I was talking about before. So we'll take them through some different things and just get their advice, get their feedback. We don't always use it explicitly, I mean, exactly like they've told us, but we use it as a good guide.
Right. What about you, Ezra? Do you find clients are willing to do testing?
All the time. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah?
It's something that's exactly what we do
Right.
every day, day in and day out. It's a lot easier argument to have with a client when you can have data to show them,
Right.
a result rather than getting personal opinion involved.
Gotcha.
And it's usually a lot easier when there's especially multiple stakeholders at the table and they're all putting in their own personal opinions as to what may or may not work. When you can show the data, it's,
Right.
the answer's there.
My second follow-up question was just around the length of time, right? Because we often will see clients come in the door and they want something stood up like tomorrow. If I'm embarking on a redesign or a major overhaul, if I'm going to do testing, I'm going to analyze the data, like what's the time horizon? Is this the sort of thing that you can turn around in a month or two, or is this like a long-term project?
Well, it depends.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing a full re-platform or redesign, then it can take you 6 months, a year. But I think it depends a lot on the platform as well. So, if you've got a platform that allows you to have one particular technology platform and content management system, but you can spin up multiple sites or sections of sites quickly,
Right.
And you're not having to go through IT to do every little thing, I think that's what you should be looking for. You can go the proprietary route, or you can go the open source route. Obviously, my company is on the open source route. Same security and compliance, but it's usually a little bit faster, and enables the marketing department a little more than perhaps having to go through IT all the time.
Right.
No offense, IT.
No offense.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the company and what, how much red tape there is.
Right.
I've worked with companies where it might take them a month to migrate a website, and I've worked with other companies where it might only take, less than one workday. So it really just depends on who the company is, how accessible is the information that you need, how willing are they to work with you on these things.
Yeah. And how about you, Ezra? How long are your projects?
If I understand correctly, you're asking how do you make it significantly significant to determine if a result is working or not? Yeah, it all depends on what the scenario is.
Yeah.
But luckily, I mean, there's tools that do that for us.
Right.
So it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it, and it just comes down to the volume of traffic, the volume of interaction you have. Sometimes it can be a really short period of time. Sometimes you can get an answer in a couple of days, and other times it can take months or a lot longer, depending on that volume of traffic there.
Right.
Yeah. I will say one thing that isn't really about the site, but it's about the content. So if you are doing a redesign, one thing that I think gets overlooked when you're doing your project planning is if you're doing a redesign and you're doing, changing up your messaging, it's not just a straight migration. You're having to rewrite everything, and you can't just go from old site to new site and migrate by writing a script. It's relaying out different pages, so that type of migration does take a lot more time, and you should take your time to do it. Otherwise, it's going to come across very sloppy.
Right, right. And you touched on something, Eric, around kind of internal IT and how that can add some red tape. I'm curious for your thoughts, guys, on kind of in-source versus outsource, right? We come across clients who take care of almost all of their own website except for specialized sections like IR and newsroom. Then we come across clients, particularly in my region in Europe, they don't want anything to do with the whole thing. They want to outsource the whole thing. If you can only do one piece, forget it, right? They want to outsource the whole thing. And then we have clients on the complete opposite scale who want to host the whole thing themselves and are even reluctant to plug in certain elements, right? So, how do companies approach that decision of in-house versus outsource? And does it require a lot of resources internally to do that full in-house solution? And does it become then worth it to consider outsourcing? What do you guys think?
I think it just depends on the company. I think, do you want to hire all the experts in-house and have them always on your payroll? Or do you want to have, just experts that you can outsource at any point in time and just not have to worry about it? So I think it depends on the company.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I agree. I think you think about it in two different ways. There's if you're doing a redesign, then you probably are going to want some mix of your in-house resources and an agency of some sort or a partner. But when it comes to the ongoing maintenance and management and updates, smaller updates to your site, I personally think that is best suited to be handled internally as much as possible, just from a budget standpoint. And just be really self-aware in terms of what your team is capable of and what they're not. Using my team as an example, we're really capable of doing the ongoing updates and maintenance, but for a redesign, we needed to work with a partner for some of the UX as well as the experience design and the interface design. So that was outside of our capabilities.
Right. And what about you, Ezra? Do you guys see a mix?
We are an agency, so
yeah. So you might be a bit biased. It's fine.
There's transparency there. No, I mean, it's a mix of both. The way that we work with our clients is very collaborative, but I think at the end of the day, the value an agency brings is a lot of history, a lot of what has worked, where some benchmarks are. They can provide some good insights that have worked for other clients in similar industries, and so that can really kind of jumpstart a lot of discussions instead of having to learn it yourself from scratch. And it's worked out well.
Yeah, it's kind of expertise that your average company probably doesn't have kicking around in-house, right?
And it kind of takes you out of the echo chamber too, right? You have somebody who has worked with a lot of different companies. They know what the pitfalls are.
Yeah.
You know, they know what the successes are, and they bring that to you.
Yeah, well, and you can avoid that scenario where, you end up with this, a deck of ideas or messages, and you're bouncing it around. People are maybe reading it, maybe not totally reading it, approved, right? And you end up with messaging that you're maybe not fully happy with in the end.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you can always blame the agency if it doesn't work.
Also,
out.
yes.
So that's always good.
That's the best part of having an agency, right? So I wanted to make sure we dug into some of the different sections on the website, and certainly near and dear to our hearts here at West is the investor relations section. So, I mean, when you think about the IR section of the website, what are investors really looking for? What should be first and foremost on that IR homepage? What should be easy? What can you bury? What are investors and analysts looking for on that section of the website?
I think it's information that's easy to consume. Going back to the Apple IR website, like kind of just on the top of the page just says, come back here at this date, at this time, to be able to listen to our earnings call. And just having that front and center is very easy. And then they just have like 4 big, nice buttons that, here's information for journalists. Here are the past filings, and just being able to present all of that in the right way and make it accessible on mobile also, I think is important.
Yeah, I would always think about it in terms of, you think about your site, you've obviously gone through and done some persona work, you know who your main users are, but even when you get down to a particular section, like an IR section, you have a very specific audience that you know you're talking to. Always think about it through the lens of what questions are they asking that brought them here? And I guess for IR, they're looking for the latest news and information. They're looking for answers about something they heard or saw in their Twitter feed, and they want answers now. So I think being able to keep that in mind, and when they hit your page, are they able to find that as quickly as possible? I really liked your point earlier. The having a site and thinking that's the only place you should put your information is about 10 years old.
Right.
So, I mean, the ability to subscribe to something so I don't have to come to your site is probably as important as the page itself.
I mean, you have your standard requirements and compliance requirements you have to abide by. But aside from that, there's an interesting study that Acquia released in this past April, that showed the biggest thing that was missing from the IR sites was historical slide deck data. It seems to be that's where the missing link is for a lot of visitors. So, I mean, aside from that, the rest, making it simple, straightforward to access. One of my favorite IR sites is the Amazon site. It's a great example of how you can make it really simple, really straightforward, and with really positive user experience. And the MGM resort site is another good example of one as well. They both do a really great job of architecting it and providing that great user experience.
I like the Amazon one too. It's like they put numbers in front of it. It's like chapters. And so it's just guiding the visitor along to each section and just making it very accessible.
Yeah. You guys touched on mobile and also on this idea of making it easy to subscribe, easy to have that information at my hand. Do you have thoughts on responsive design versus an IR app or application for a phone specific to the IR section? They were kind of hot for a little while, seem to have kind of calmed down a little bit. What's your thoughts on that? Are they going away entirely in place of responsive design?
Yeah, I think responsive design is the way to go. I mean, now your iPhone is going to delete apps you don't use, so it's not like you can continuously send notifications to somebody if they're not using your app. So make it easy, have a short domain name that's just easy to type in on your phone. Get Amazon.inc for your investor relations page, and it's just everything's there, and just make it easy to get to with just a couple clicks from your browser.
Yeah.
Same, responsive.
Responsive's the way.
Well, I mean, other than the ones who are coming back over and over and over to see this information, the main path to the releases that are on there is going to be through Google search. So,
Right.
I mean, I would go responsive.
Yeah.
To me, they're two different things depending on what the purpose is,
Right.
The app versus mobile site. But I mean, complete mobile friendliness, response is definitely the way to go.
Yeah.
Something that's really making a lot of headways is progressive web apps now instead of the traditional native app. So that's that would on the app side, that would be a better way to go.
Right, right. So let's flip over to the newsroom then and think more about that section. What are journalists after on this section of the website?
I think it's easy like headlines, easy content to just copy and paste, just not making it difficult for them to learn about a product, get the kind of the vital stats on it, launch dates, times, things like that. Just having, again, I go back to the Apple example because it's just so good, where they've just it's a big box. Click here if you're a journalist, essentially, and they have articles. They have articles that you can easily just access. And Facebook's another good one. They have just different elements throughout their site of like, here's some vital stats about usage of WhatsApp, usage of Instagram, and how many users we have. And then here's also information about about the new privacy that we have in place. And it's almost like a blog. Right. And so you can just read up, you can kind of digest the information easily, and then repurpose it for yourself. Kind
of writes the story for them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think same thing. Know your audience. In this particular case, they're looking for as much as possible that they can tell their story.
Yeah.
Their version of your story, I
right.
guess, in that case. That and have a really easy to find and very usable media kit for them, readily available.
And they're usually trying to get it out first, right? So that's another reason why you want to make it really easy for them, because they don't want to dig around, and if someone else published it first, they might just kind of get over it.
And up to date, too, right? If I come there for today's news, I expect to find today's news there, right?
Yeah, again, creating the best possible user experience. I think where most companies make the mistake on the newsroom section is just not providing really a synopsis about what a particular piece is about. Instead they'll just paste the whole press release and here's the whole thing. And I think creating some short tidbits of info for that consumption is great, and then expanding on the details.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think we kind of forget that journalists, analysts, investors, they're people too, right? They surf the whole rest of the web, and they expect to have a similar experience on your newsroom or your IR website as they do on the whole rest of the web. Modern design, modern UX, and easy to access information. And I think we lose sight of this sometimes, thinking that they're going to want to read through 50 press releases to find the bit of information that they're looking for, and they're not going to do that, right? So let's think about now where these two specialized sections come together. I mean, I often tell clients there are synergies between the two, even though a lot of times companies will run these as two totally separate tracks, and you'll end up with kind of a different look and feel in the two sections of the site. So, I mean, are there synergies? How can companies bring these two sections of the website together?
I've mostly seen them cross-promoted from each other, but I have seen most of the ones I've seen have been two separate pages or sections of the site, but there's enough, I guess, cross-linking that should occur between the two, and just make it as easy as possible. I think Starbucks is a good example. Apple, I also think they do a good job of right there when you hit the page, it's cross-promoting the newsroom for journalists as well, but that's the way I've seen it mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the best implementation is to have a corporate website and a consumer site. And rather than, I've seen a lot of companies do this, they try to just bury all their corporate information somewhere where their customers aren't going to accidentally land on it. So what you should do instead is, your investors are customers too, and they should just have their own dedicated website, and within that you have a newsroom section, you have an IR section, and you make sure that you're giving them a complete experience, just separate from the customer pages.
What do you recommend to your clients, Ezra?
Yeah, it's just how it's architected. Very different user groups with different needs and requirements. It's just about making sure that they can access the information they need really quickly. I do disagree with splitting up into two different websites.
Yeah.
We try to more advocate in terms of consolidating as many sites as possible to create that authority as a central hub of information from a website perspective. That helps from many different perspectives. But I think it's then just guiding the visitor towards the right path, and doing that in a really intuitive way.
Yeah, and seamless. We have a client out of Boston called Athena Health who does a great job of seamlessly mending the two sites, and you hit press releases and you don't actually know you've left the IR section for the PR section, using a filter, for example, in your news releases, so you can put general and financial releases together. the user doesn't even know they're technically in a different section of the site, right? They've
Exactly.
married it together really well.
So do you think that the customer website and the investor relations website should live on just one website altogether?
On the same domain.
On the same domain name?
Yeah. Instead of two separate.
Not even a subdomain or anything,
No.
literally on the same domain
On
name.
the same domain, yeah. It helps create authority from, I mean, well, you'll hear my colleague Justin speak later on SEO, but there's just from that perspective alone, there's a lot of benefit. But then also from just creating that experience throughout your brand and not them having to go through different domains. And
Having that more unified experience across the two. Yeah.
So that's actually an area where I disagree with you, because I think that
That's okay. It's fine to disagree.
no, totally. That's what this is for, right?
Right.
And I think I gave this example to somebody last night, but Walgreens is, they're owned by Walgreens Boots Alliance, Inc. And they have Walgreens.com, which is their consumer-facing site, and then they use WalgreensBootsAlliance.com for their corporate site, which then has their newsroom and IR site. And I don't think that this is Walgreens we're talking about. They have plenty of web authority, so for them, I don't think they're losing traffic to have. There's no risk of a customer accidentally going to the Walgreens Boots Alliance site and and vice versa.
Right.
You can still link to your corporate site from your consumer-facing site, but having it separate and having the ability to have full control of that site and not have to worry about a confused customer experience or visitor experience because they accidentally land on the wrong page. My personal opinion is that's a better experience.
Right. Could it be different depending on the size of your company?
Totally.
Right. If you're not Walgreens or
Right,
Boots,
right.
right?
that all
could be
comes
different.
down to how you architect the site, though.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like, someone shouldn't get confused as to where they are if the site's been architected properly.
Yeah. You should always know where you are, right? Am I on the corporate site? Am I on the consumer site?
And if you're looking at a Walgreens or a Walmart or a consumer brand, you're not going to obviously put investor information front, right, and center on the homepage.
Probably not.
It's just, yeah. So,
Well, that's fair. That's fair. We can agree to disagree, right? So let's talk a little bit about some of the content and multimedia in particular, because we've had a real focus on multimedia. How important is it to have multimedia assets, great high-res imagery, videos? Does it drive more traffic than text? And does it give you a different message to your audience than just sort of the bare bones, not only a couple photos type website we used to see?
I don't think that impacts driving traffic, but other than the fact that you should think about multimedia and video especially as not something that's just sitting on your site, but how do you have the shorter 15s version of those that you're using distributed. But I do think it helps improve the user experience of the site tremendously if done properly.
And what's properly?
Could be a really long answer. I think
That's fine. We have time.
keeping it fairly brief, even on the site. I don't think I think somebody's coming to watch a 20-minute TED Talk, sure, but I think most people want to get in and out in less than 2 minutes. I think making sure you are focusing on the quality of the video. Obviously, make sure you're doing that through a platform that can support it. Nobody wants to hit play and then have it just sit there and stall. Don't just provide the video, provide some sort of TLDR, lead for what it is, because I don't want to click play if I can just read the synopsis of it and understand what I'm about to see. So,
Right.
And then have the full transcript somewhere.
Gotcha. Because that improves SEO, right? To have that transcript sitting on the back of the video.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. And I think I think it's a good thing. It makes the information more consumable, especially if you're focusing on a lot of numbers and a lot of filings. Having a lot of imagery is going to help break up the text, make it just easier to digest. So more of that is a good thing.
Yeah.
yeah, to me, it's not one or the other. It's a combination of both and just how you use both.
Yeah.
If you're doing some kind of interview, you're going to have that video embedded perhaps in the article of the page itself. So it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
And some tidbits to helping improve that video is good title with embedded key phrase to it. The transcript, definitely, that's a big thing. Google and other search engines can't crawl video yet.
Yeah.
So that having that transcript or that text embedded around it is really helpful, and tags and captions will help a lot as well.
That's really helpful. And from a design perspective, what are some of the tips that you give companies who are looking to, there's some pretty old, frankly, ugly websites out there. Like when a client comes to you or when you're looking to improve the design and overall experience of your website, what are some of the top things that companies should be thinking about today?
I think we all said this, but don't underestimate how important UX and thinking about UX first. Before you even worry about design, thinking about design, and that's like, what is the brand guidelines and then design system for your site? But all of that should be led and informed by proper UX research that happens. So,
what's that research entail? Is it individuals in your company? Is it clients? Like, do you get user groups together to test that out?
yes, I start with the data as much as you have. Let's just assume that all companies have had a website before. So there should be some data that you can be looking at to help inform that.
Yeah.
But then from that point, you've got to look at that through the lens of the different personas that if you don't have them built and you don't have UX as a skill set in your team, hire an agency, have them do that for you. Even the most basic UX research should lead any design,
Right.
I think.
Yeah, thinking about the customer journey, when they land on the site, what do you actually want them to do, and how are you controlling the messages that you want them to actually read?
Yeah. As the agency, like, what do you find? Are they focused on UX, or do they come in and say, we need a brand new design, it needs to look like this? What do you find with clients that come to you?
Usually driven by some kind of emotion, like that.
Right. Our site is ugly.
Exactly. The data, like, agreed. That's the huge part of it. I think some other parts is a lot of companies just forget about some of the fundamentals. And what I mean in terms of fundamentals is making it mobile friendly, making sure it's the fastest response as possible, making sure it just has good, straightforward, content, really clear, legible, intuitiveness. Like there's these fundamentals that a lot of companies are missing out. And then you can look at some of those more enhanced, components that. But I would focus on the fundamentals first, making sure that that's really great.
Yeah.
Monitoring the data to see that there's been improvements and there, and then going from there.
Yeah. And on that, like, once you've redesigned or maybe you've just launched, what am I looking at in terms of analytics? What should I be looking at? How frequently should I be looking at my website reporting? And what am I looking for?
I would say in the beginning, early and often, right? You want to be tracking the behaviors, where they, what are they doing when they leave the site? How long are they on the site? What are they clicking on? Where's their cursor? Can you cookie them so you can see what else they're doing, and then try to remarket to them? Can you get them to subscribe for email updates, for example, so you can continue conversations that way? So I think checking it often, especially in the beginning, is important, because if people are leaving your site very quickly, something's wrong.
Right. If you notice they have to click many, many times to get what you're looking for, that's a signal you need to pull something forward in the site, right?
Right.
What do you think?
I think different companies have, their sites have very different goals. So know what the purpose and the role of your site plays, or even which section. Know the role and the purpose. What is the conversion point? So if you start there, and let's say for your IR section, maybe the goal of that is to get them to subscribe. So if that's the goal, then you can work your dashboard around that. I think at the beginning, you should be looking at that every single day. Your basic KPIs, traffic engagement, and that conversion. But you should set up some sort of automated report. You should be measuring everything, but those KPIs should get emailed to you weekly, or your team weekly. So it's just always top of mind. But yeah.
Well, and it's an important step I think clients often miss, is setting those KPIs in the beginning, right? Website's launched, project's done, right? I don't think, I've often worked with clients who haven't taken that step. It sounds like that's really important.
Yes, it should just be baked into, if you're doing the redesign or whatever the big project, it should be baked into the project itself. Something that's happening, while development is happening, is your analytics team should be building out what the dashboard's going to be.
What do you think, Ezra?
Yeah, it's defining what you want to know up front.
Yeah.
From there, the majority of things that we monitor is conversions at the end of the day. So most of our clients are looking for that lead or that conversion.
Yeah.
Most importantly is just making sure that's all set up properly. More often than not, the site's launched, and then the tracking is not properly set up. So then you're having to, take a lot of back steps. But
Right.
I think getting an agency or in-house, your analytics team to make sure that that tracking is in place and that what you want to track is trackable, and setting
Right.
that up properly will go a long way.
Right. So before we wrap, I would love to hear if we have any questions from the audience. Audience, do you have any questions? What's that? You have one? Where's Keith gone? It's coming. Oh, do I have it? We'll work together on this.
Question I had, what questions should clients be asking themselves if they're going through a process where they have a web project coming up, IT are pitching to do the job, they're thinking about agencies, and they just don't know how to make the decision as to which route to go under? What questions should companies be asking themselves in order to guide their decision-making process?
The question of whether to go with an agency or not, or is that what you're...
How to go through the process.
I mean, for me, it first comes down to a resource situation, right? I mean, if you have the resources internally to do it yourself, then you can do maybe a lot of, at least some of the work. The agency will help guide you and give you some direction, and particularly with strategy, especially from an outside opinion. Working at West, you're drinking the West Kool-Aid, you have, your West hat on, you're in a certain frame of mind, at least you can get some outside POV on it. I think that's a lot of the benefit that you have from it. And then it just depends on the resources that you have and what your timelines are.
Yeah, agreed. And don't take emotion out of it, and pride, and be self-aware as to what your in-house capabilities actually are. So I'd be surprised if, I think most companies need some sort of outside agency help for at least some part of the project. At the very least, just for even having an objective voice in the room. I think you called it echo chamber, and that's spot on.
Right.
So I think I think having a nice mix is probably the best route, in my opinion. But taking emotion out of it and just making a checklist of all the things that your team and your company's capable of, and being real honest about the things you're not that great at.
Yeah, I think try to determine what do you want, and be honest with yourself. Is this something we can do in-house or not? And I think you should talk to agencies regardless, because they will give you other ideas. You might figure out that there are things that you should be doing that you haven't thought of, and the best way to get those done is with an agency. And I was going to say something else, but I forgot now.
Bernie, you had a question.
Yeah. So one of the challenges that we sometimes have working with clients, some of the clients that you mentioned at best practice sites, we often try to coach them not to design the site for themselves and their own user preferences. Sometimes there's some strong pushback there. And I'm wondering how you guys handle the fact that they're the paying client, but you don't think that's actually going to end up as the best experience for their end users.
Happens all the time.
Yep.
Just let the data make the decision.
Yep.
The client is strong on a particular opinion or idea. You can do both. You can test it. Just see which one converts best.
Yeah, I would, data 100%, but going back to do even the most basic UX research first and frame it all up based on those personas. And then so if it's your CEO who loves your competitor site, and that's what's driving, before you show any design mock-up, before you show, have a meeting where you've gone through some of the user data, not boring, put it in executive level, but show them what's actually happening and what your users actually want. If you've done that, advisory board, and you've done kind of the feedback session, sound bites from that. Let that sort of debunk some of the things that they want that in your gut that it's not the right thing to do.
I think it's being able to point to other use cases and being able to say, hey, here's a success story from another business that felt the way you did, and this is what we were able to do with them. and these are the results. So it is data, but don't just look at your own. Look at other people's if you can.
And I'll just add, it never seems to amaze us like that the things you would think, to us would convert best don't. Sometimes the most ugliest, like the worst colors, the worst combination of elements that actually convert the best. Like it's mind-boggling sometimes, like what actually works. It's just, yeah, so.
Other questions?
I have 2 comments, and actually maybe you guys could talk about it a little bit. The first one, and it's interesting to hear you guys talk about best practices and redesigns and what we're talking to clients about. But my first comment is, and maybe you guys can talk a little bit about HTTPS, right? Google's made a lot of changes recently, and I'm still kind of surprised how people are kind of putting that as a best practice for a website as opposed to a requirement in all cases. And I'm still a little bit surprised about that. And the second thing was around accessibility, right? WCAG 2.0, A and AA, I feel like should be a requirement for every single project. And again, not a best practice, right? That should be what we're focused on, right? And that should be, because that can help in the UX, that can help in, not just IR, but conversions on purchasing products. So maybe you guys could talk a little bit about those things as well.
I completely agree. I mean, to me, that's part of the list of fundamentals that you want to get right up front. HTTPS requirement. Your site should have one, hands down. Accessibility, in Canada we have AODA, you have HIPAA, you have requirement, CASL. I mean, those are, again, fundamentals that should just be implemented.
I think if you're a Fortune 1000 type of company, a best practice is a requirement for you.
Yeah. For us, on accessibility, requirement for HTTPS. But for accessibility, so one thing, that's always what we're driving for. But as many updates as you make to the site, over the course of even a month, it's easy to fall out of line with that. So we basically do a quarterly check, and our front-end designer and our web ops person go through and find where we've broken our own rules and try and clean that up. So you have that as your underlying fundamental rule, and then you just have to police yourself.
Right, it's hard, especially in IR, because you have content that you want to be accessible, that you're filing with like the Securities and Exchange Commission, that's making its way 5 hops to your website. How does that remain accessible? And even like press releases, the person creating the press release in a Word document needs to know how to make it accessible once it gets converted to PDF, once it gets uploaded into a system, once it comes over a feed, once it makes its way to your website. How does that remain accessible when somebody's viewing it, on the phone or on a laptop? So,
To answer that question, just multiple formats, right? So you can hit your compliance requirement. Boom, there's your PDF. We've hit compliance, but then offering other accessibility
right, so it's not
options.
so much that your web page is compliant.
Correct. Yeah.
It's not so much that your page, your HTML is compliant, but that you have a PDF version, you
Right.
have, right.
Yeah,
So.
and I'm using Amazon a lot, but Amazon does a great example of that, where they have just the latest of each of the components, but they have multiple different formats, really clear and straightforward. It's a great example you should check out to help guide you. Yeah, it's great. Yeah,
Good job.
You did a good job.
Other questions?
Hi. Ezra, I think you mentioned progressive web apps is something that's kind of trending and coming up more and more. Can you talk a little bit about what type of organizations are using progressive web apps and what type of content they're allowing to be accessible offline?
It's just a different technology. So you're getting the very similar result as a native app. It's just utilizing a different technology to do that. So instead of, I don't want to get too technical, but instead of using software to create that code that's installed on the actual phone itself, it lives and breathes on the web. So it's used more like a web technology than a native software technology. So it's just
just a more enhanced and easier, more efficient developing mechanism to provide content through mobile.
Any other questions? Well, thank you for your question. Oh, we have one more? Jamie.
So it's actually a question, more your feedback, autoplay video or not to autoplay video?
Not.
Yeah, no. It's just bad user experience.
It depends where it's being played. Right? For the website, I wouldn't. But to that point, use a really good initial thumbnail. Right?
Yeah.
Don't have that initial thumbnail as like title page of your presentation. Right? Have it of something engaging in the presentation. And we found that having a person in that initial thumbnail really makes a big difference in that click-through rate. So that can really help make a difference on it. Yeah.
Any other last questions? Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for your questions, and thank you to our panelists, gentlemen. That was fantastic.